All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to unpack a pretty intense framework from a text by an author who goes by the Appalachian Gorilla. He makes this really powerful comparison that the experience of having your worldview completely shattered is a lot like the psychological stages of grief you go through when you lose someone you love. So, the whole thing kicks off with this massive question. I mean, just think about it. What happens when the ideas you build your life on, the things that make up who you are, suddenly turn out to be completely wrong? It's a heavy thought, and that's the journey we're about to go on. Now, to really get this, we have to understand a key idea the author uses, the paradigm. He basically describes it as a mental map. You know, our brains are these incredible pattern recognition machines, and they build this map of the world for us so we can navigate reality, make sense of things, and, well, feel safe. To show how these paradigms, these maps, can be just a little bit off, the author gives us a simple but really smart example. We all look at a dollar bill and we think that's money. But if you actually look at it, it says Federal Reserve Note. His point is that it's just a stand-in, a currency, not the real thing. It's a small difference, but it shows how our mental map might not be as accurate as we think. And this is where it gets serious. The author takes us from this sort of academic point about money to the real, high-stakes emotional core of his whole argument. What happens when it's not just a tiny detail on your map that's wrong, but a huge fundamental belief you have about trust, about society, or even about yourself? So here's the big idea. The author suggests that losing a core belief is just like losing a person. He says our minds treat these foundational ideas like family members. They give us comfort, they give us strength. So when one of those ideas dies, we grieve. And that grief, he argues, follows a very predictable path. And this is that path. According to the author, you move through these 5 distinct stages. You start by fighting the new reality, and you end, hopefully, by accepting it. This is basically the roadmap for the psychological earthquake we're about to walk through. Okay, let's get into the first phase of this. The author groups the first 2 stages together and calls them the fight. And that's exactly what it is. It's this period of active and often really raw resistance to this new uncomfortable truth. It all starts with denial. And this quote just nails that first gut reaction, right? You get some piece of information that just shatters your paradigm, and your first instinct is to fight back, to argue, to do whatever you can to hold on to that old, comfortable map that you know. So yeah, the denial stage is all about arguing, trying to poke holes in the new information. But what's really interesting is that the author doesn't see this as some big flaw. He actually frames it as a healthy defense mechanism. It's a necessary filter that stops you from just believing anything and flipping your worldview every other day. But denial can't last forever. When the evidence just becomes too much to ignore, the author says you fall into the next stage, anger. And wow, he uses this incredibly visceral metaphor of a cornered animal to describe it, just pure lashing out rage. According to the text, this anger gets pointed at anyone you feel lied to or hid the truth from you. And it can be explosive, turning outward on other people or inward through really destructive behavior. The world just feels like a darker, uglier place because your old mental map, the one that was supposed to help you avoid these very feelings, has been completely torched. So after all that fighting, that outward pushback, comes what the author calls the fall. This is where the resistance pretty much stops and the struggle turns inward. This takes us through the next 2 stages, bargaining and depression. In the bargaining stage, you're basically trying to logic your way back to how things were. You might try to rationalize what happened, maybe even blame yourself. The author gives this really specific example of a man who gets cheated on, and his first instinct is to go, get in shape, as if he can somehow bargain his way back into the old world by fixing himself for a role that's already gone. But bargaining rarely works, and that failure leads to the next stage, depression. And the author introduces this one with a pretty grim and direct warning. He really sees this as the most dangerous part of the whole cycle. This stage is described as being deep and long. It can be marked by high-risk, destructive stuff, or the total opposite, just this state of apathy, of letting yourself go. But even as he paints this bleak picture, the author notes that going through something like this is a common, though obviously very difficult, part of life. And just to hammer home how deadly serious he considers this stage, the author makes this very specific and stark claim. It's a dramatic point, and it's meant to show that he sees the stakes here as, quite literally, life or death. But if you can make it through that darkness, the framework says you finally reach the last stage, the aftermath,
or acceptance. And it's really important to get this. This isn't some storybook happy ending. It's something else entirely. See, acceptance isn't a moment of joy. It's a moment of quiet, profound clarity. The author describes it as this simple, almost sudden realization. The fight is over. The bargains have all failed. You just wake up one day and get it. This is the new reality. There's no fixing it. There's no going back.
But acceptance isn't just an end. It's actually a beginning. It's a kind of rebirth. Once you stop trying to tape together that old, broken map, you're finally free to start drawing a new one. The author calls this a time of learning, of being curious like a kid again, exploring new ideas and experiences. Because all the old certainties are gone, it's all about rebuilding. And this right here is maybe the most important part. The author makes it crystal clear that this whole journey leaves scars, permanent ones. The pain, the sense of betrayal, the anger, it doesn't just vanish. It gets baked into your new worldview as caution, as a healthy dose of mistrust. This quote really sums up the author's final takeaway. Gaining this new, maybe even clearer perspective on the world comes at a steep price. It's a painful trade of innocence for experience. And, as he puts it, it's a trade you're forced to make. So this is where we land. The author offers up this whole 5-stage cycle not as a cure, but as a guide, like a lantern in a really dark cave to help you find your way. Its real value is that it gives a name to the chaos. It suggests there's a human pattern even in that deep disorientation. But it leaves us with a pretty heavy question to think about. Does seeing the world more clearly always have to hurt this much?